The philosophers' views often got them in trouble. Many governments and the church felt it was their duty to protect the existing social and political system. In France, for example, it was illegal to criticize either the Catholic Church or the government. They tried to use censorship, or restricting access to information, to prevent Enlightenment ideas from spreading. Many philosophers landed in jail or were exiled. Voltaire, for example, experienced both punishments. Nevertheless, Enlightenment ideas spread throughout Europe. In the 1700s, Paris was the cultural and intellectual capital of Europe. Young people from around Europe and also from the Americas came to study, philosophize, and enjoy fine culture. The brightest minds of the age gathered there. From their circles radiated the ideas of the Enlightenment. The buzz of Enlightenment ideas was most intense in the mansions of several wealthy women of Paris. There, in their large drawing rooms, these hostesses held regular social gatherings called salons. At these events, philosophers, writers, artists, scientists, and other great intellects met to discuss ideas and enjoy artistic performances. The most influential of the salon hostesses was Marie-Thérèse Geoffroy. Self-educated and from the well-to-do middle class, Madame Geoffroy was friends with both philosophers and heads of state. She corresponded with the King of Sweden and Catherine the Great of Russia. Madame Geoffroy also helped finance the project of a leading philosopher named Denis Diderot. Diderot imagined a large set of books to which all the leading scholars of Europe would contribute articles and essays. This encyclopedia, as he called it, would bring together all the most current and enlightened thinking about science, technology, art, government, and more. Diderot began publishing the first volumes in 1751. The Enlightenment views expressed in the articles soon angered both the French government and the Catholic Church. Their censors banned the work. They said it undermined royal authority, encouraged a spirit of revolt, and fostered moral corruption, irreligion, and unbelief. Fearing arrest, some leading philosophers withdrew from the project and urged Diderot to quit. Diderot pressed on, however, and finally won permission to continue publishing the encyclopedia. New volumes came out regularly under his editorship until 1772. The salons and the encyclopedia helped spread Enlightenment ideas to educated people all over Europe. The enlightened thinkers of Europe considered themselves part of an intellectual community that they referred to as the Republic of Letters. They shared their ideas through books, personal letters, visits back and forth, and magazine articles. As one writer of the day described the flurry of communication, "Never have new ideas had such rapid circulation at such a long distance." Enlightenment ideas also eventually reached middle-class people through newspapers, pamphlets, and even political songs. Enlightenment ideas about government and equality attracted the attention of a growing, literate middle class. This group had money, but limited status and political power. With their money, middle-class people could afford to buy many books and support the work of artists. Through its purchasing power, this group had growing influence over European culture in the 1700s. Before the Enlightenment, European art had been dominated by the style called Baroque. The Catholic Church sponsored this style as part of its reforms, and absolute monarchs adopted it to glorify themselves. Baroque artists created paintings rich in color and detail, and full of drama and energy. Architects incorporated the style into their designs as well, and produced magnificent structures covered with elaborate decorations. The Palace of Versailles, built by Louis XIV of France, and the Royal Palace in St. Petersburg, built by Peter the Great of Russia, are both examples of this. Musicians like the German composer Johann Sebastian Bach and the English composer George Frederick Handel composed dramatic organ and choral music. Under the influence of the Enlightenment, styles began to change. The arts began to reflect the new emphasis on reason, order, and balance. Artists and architects worked in a simple and elegant style. They borrowed ideas and themes from classical Greece and Rome, because those cultures had emphasized reason, order, and balance. As a result, the style of the late 1700s came to be called neoclassical or new classical. In music, the style of this period is called classical. The most successful artist of the neoclassical style was the French painter Jacques-Louis David. David lived through the turbulence of the French Revolution and the rise of Napoleon. His work depicts serious scenes from classical history, as well as the great events of the revolutionary period. In his 1787 painting, The Death of Socrates, David shows the classical philosopher Socrates, a symbol of reason, bathed in light. Socrates was a great hero of the Enlightenment because he was a teacher and philosopher who challenged accepted traditions and ideas and was willing to die in defense of his beliefs. This 1785 painting by David, called Oath of the Horatii, is another excellent example of neoclassicism. The painting, produced in 1785, depicts a story from the early days of the Roman Republic when three brothers volunteer to fight as champions for Rome against a rival city. The brothers swear an oath to conquer or die, expressing their willingness to sacrifice themselves for the good of the Republic. Not only does the painting contain impressive classical imagery, it uses balance and proportion in how the figures are positioned. In addition, the painting avoids the excessive color and drama of Baroque art in favor of a powerful message simply and clearly expressed. In the late 1700s, the city of Vienna in Austria became a major center of Enlightenment thought and culture. The city became especially famous for its great art and music. Three composers in Vienna rank among the greatest figures of the classical period in music. They were Franz Joseph Haydn, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, and Ludwig van Beethoven. Haydn was particularly important in developing new musical forms, such as the sonata and symphony. Mozart was a gifted child who began composing music at the age of 5 and gave concerts throughout Europe as a youth. At age 12, he wrote his first opera. Mozart's great operas, such as The Marriage of Figaro and The Magic Flute, set a new standard for elegance and originality. Although he lived only to age 35, Mozart wrote more than 600 musical works. Beethoven showed enormous range in his work. He wrote beautiful piano music, string quartets, and stirring symphonies. Beethoven's earlier works were in the same classical style as Mozart's. However, his later compositions began new trends, which carried music into a new style. Writers in the 18th century also developed new styles and forms of literature. A number of European authors began writing novels, lengthy works of prose fiction. These books were popular with a middle-class audience, who liked the entertaining stories written in everyday language. Writers, including many women, turned out a flood of popular novels in the 1700s. English novelists developed many of the features of the modern novel. Their works had carefully crafted plots, used suspense and climax, and explored their characters' thoughts and feelings. Samuel Richardson's Pamela is often considered the first true English novel. It told the story of a young servant girl who refused the advances of her master. And Henry Fielding's comic masterpiece, Tom Jones, the hero of the book is an orphan who has been kicked out of his adopted home. He travels all over England and overcomes numerous obstacles to win the hand of his lady. A third popular English novelist was Daniel Defoe, author of the adventure Robinson Crusoe. Crusoe is a sailor stranded on a tropical island. Through his wits and the help of a native he calls Friday, Crusoe learns how to survive on the island and is eventually rescued. The spirit of the Enlightenment also swept through Europe's royal courts. Most philosophes distrusted democracy. Instead, they believed that change had to be imposed from above by monarchs. Many philosophes, including Voltaire, believed that the best form of government was a monarchy in which the ruler respected the people's rights. The philosophes tried to convince monarchs to rule justly. Some monarchs embraced the new ideas and made reforms that reflected the Enlightenment spirit. They became known as enlightened despots. Despot means absolute ruler. Although the enlightened despots supported the philosophes' ideas, they also had no intention of giving up any power. The changes they made were motivated by two desires. They wanted to make their country stronger and their own rule more effective. The foremost of Europe's enlightened despots were Frederick II of Prussia, Holy Roman Emperor Joseph II of Austria, and Catherine the Great of Russia. Frederick II, the King of Prussia from 1740 to 1786, was known as Frederick the Great because of his many achievements. He once wrote to Voltaire, "I must enlighten my people, cultivate their manners and morals, and make them as happy as human beings can be, or as happy as the means at my disposal permit." Frederick indeed committed himself to reforming Prussia. He granted religious toleration, stating that in his kingdom everyone can go to heaven in his own fashion. Frederick also reduced censorship and improved education. He reformed the justice system and abolished the use of torture. However, Frederick's changes only went so far. For example, he believed that serfdom was wrong, but he did nothing to end it. This was because he needed the support of wealthy landowners. As a result, he never challenged the power of the Junkers or tried to change the existing social order. Perhaps Frederick's most important contribution was his attitude toward being king. He called himself the first servant of the state. From the beginning of his reign, he made it clear that his goal was to serve and strengthen his country. This attitude was clearly one that appealed to the philosophes. The most radical reformer was Joseph II of Austria. The son and successor of Maria Theresa, Joseph II ruled Austria from 1780 to 1790. Reflecting the influence of Enlightenment thought, Joseph proclaimed on taking power that, "I have made philosophy the lawmaker of my empire. Her logical applications are going to transform Austria." Joseph introduced legal reforms and freedom of the press. Though Catholic, he also supported freedom of worship, even for Protestants, Orthodox Christians, and Jews. In his most radical reform, Joseph abolished serfdom and ordered that peasants be paid for their labor with cash. Not surprisingly, the nobles and the church firmly resisted Joseph's reforms, which threatened their power and privileges. After Joseph died, most of his reforms, including the abolition of serfdom, were reversed. The ruler most admired by the philosophes was Catherine II, known as Catherine the Great. She ruled Russia from 1762 to 1796. The well-educated empress read the works of the philosophes, and she exchanged many letters with Voltaire. She ruled with absolute authority, but she also took steps to modernize and reform Russia. In 1767, Catherine formed a commission to review Russia's laws. She presented it with a brilliant proposal for reforms based on the ideas of Montesquieu and Beccaria. Among other changes, she recommended allowing religious toleration and abolishing torture and capital punishment. Her commission, however, accomplished none of these lofty goals. Catherine eventually put in place limited reforms, but she did little to improve the life of the Russian peasants. Her thinking about enlightened ideas changed after a massive uprising of serfs in 1773. With great brutality, Catherine's army crushed the rebellion. Catherine had previously favored an end to serfdom. However, the revolt convinced her that she needed the nobles' support to keep her throne. Therefore, she gave the nobles absolute power over the serfs. As a result, Russian serfs lost their last traces of freedom. Catherine's greatest success came in the area of foreign policy. Peter the Great had fought for years to win a port on the Baltic Sea. Likewise, Catherine sought access to the Black Sea. In 2 wars with the Ottoman Turks, her armies finally won control of the northern shore of the Black Sea. Russia also gained the right to send ships through the Ottoman-controlled straits leading from the Black Sea to the Mediterranean Sea. Catherine also expanded her empire westward into Poland. In Poland, the king was relatively weak. and independent nobles held the most power. The three neighboring powers, Russia, Prussia, and Austria, each tried to assert their influence over the country. In 1772, these land-hungry neighbors each took a piece of Poland and what is called the Partition of Poland. And further partitions in 1793 and 1795, they grabbed up the rest of Poland's territory. With these partitions, Poland disappeared from the map of Europe. It did not reappear as an independent country until after World War I. By the end of her remarkable reign, Catherine had vastly enlarged the Russian Empire.